Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? We are back with another transmission. If you're new to this channel, hit that like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. In tonight's transmission, I'm going to be discussing the afflictions and the implications of ecological humanitarian crisis, which is to come when you're talking about the Great Reset in the 10 days of darkness. We finna get into it tonight. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, put the rice bowls in the chat. We finna cook up the esoteric knowledge. We finna cook up the information. Because like I've been telling y'all, we're at the apex of solar cycle 25, which is the spiritual metamorphosis period of the Great Awakening period, right? And the reason I say that is because the shift is shifting, right? Everything is starting to shift. So when you're talking about an energy crisis, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, they said verbatim that the great majority of planet Earth is going through an energy crisis. So that is your precursor to the 10 days of darkness. That is your precursor to Jonah chapter 3, verse 5, when you're talking about judgment being on American soil. Nineveh shall be overthrown. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, put those rice bowls in the chat. You already know what time it is. We finna cook them up. Let me get my screen share going here for a second. Get a little organized. All right. So let me get that going. All right, here we go. Now, when you're talking about the 10 days of darkness, the grid going down, this is a part of the timeline of eschatology. It's all a prophetic event that's connected to the Bible, which is a Freemasonic playbook. I keep telling you guys that. That's why everything according to scripture is following the script of the timeline when you're talking about the geopolitical tensions that's taking place with Iran, China, Russia, and America, which is modern day Babylon. So all this is interconnected to the extraterrestrial stuff. We finna get into that. But live update, Iran rejects terms to end war proposed by Trump administration, State TV says, right? Now, they're gonna keep this shit going on. You got to understand that we done killed off, the great majority of their leaders, right? When you're talking about Qasem Soleimani and Machoba Khomeini, the great majority of their leaders has basically been, unalived. So they're gonna look for some type of combative energy towards America. So there's gonna be some type of psychological operation that's gonna be taking place on American soil eventually, because I keep telling y'all, Donald Trump is the 9/11 president. 4 plus 5, 45th president. 4 plus 5 is 9. He's the 47th president. 4 plus 7 is 11. He's the 9/11 president because there's going to be a 9/11 event that's going to be taking place on his watch. And I showed to you in the last transmission where he said verbatim, we know where the sleeper cells is at. He said it right in your face on national television. So that basically tells you that, this whole thing, this psychological operation is going to be an inside job. If you know where the fuck they at, go get them, right? That's because, when you understand the apex of Canaanite culture, everything is based in sacrifice, right? But they got to give you the truth, so they mix the medicine with the candy. They mix truth and lies together, so that's what makes Donald Trump a chaos agent. He is playing both sides. Yes, he's telling you there's sleeper cells in America, so that's why you got to be very meticulous of your surroundings. So if Iran doesn't fully open without threat, the Strait of Hormuz, within 48 hours from this exact point of time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first, right? So This is all leading up to this whole chaotic energy when you're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, which controls the great majority of oil and energy on planet Earth. So, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, we was warned Monday that the crisis triggered by the United States Israeli strikes and the Iranian retaliation is very severe, even worse than the oil shocks of 1970s, right? So this is said verbatim by Shannon Joy, who is the International Atomic Energy Agency. She's on the board of directors and has proposed a extreme measures for a energy crisis. So that means that no driving, flights are going to be grounded. You're going to be forced to work at home. No gas cooking. So that is even when you're talking about the license plates could be decided, based on the drive. And then it's also talking about how the government is going to decide what is essential. So maybe we need another shutdown because we living in a time right now where motherfuckers need to sit the fuck down and find out what the hell is going on. Because there's a lot of NPCs who is stagnating the evolution of the planet, right? Because I keep telling you guys, human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter because physical destruction is facilitated by spiritual energy that's transmuted from the cosmos, right? So that means that the planet has to go through a resetting period. So even from an ecological standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, from a governmental standpoint, everything has to go through a reset. And then once you get to the apex of the reset, that's when the worldwide humanity will soon experience the seven trumpets. The seven trumpets is basically the personification of the emergency broadcasting alerts delivered directly to every phone on planet Earth, right? So these are not ordinary notifications. These are your signal of the final awakening period. That's why I put out the last video called The Final Sign, right? Because the emergency broadcasting systems, like I said, it's personification of the trumpets. But the trumpets is also acclimated to the seven thunders, and the seven thunders is interconnected that basically interfaces with human consciousness, and we finna get into that as we get through the transmission. So these notifications is going to be popping up on your phone. Each trumpet will call us to tune in to our televisions, to our radios, to receive the truth that has been hidden for centuries. So this was basically going to happen when you got, so a lot of people got to understand the dichotomy and the diametrical difference between an EMP and a CME. An EMP is nuclear detonation that is amplified by the extraction of electron particles in the atmosphere once they get stripped away. Now, a CME is a coronal mass ejection that is extracted from the energy of the sun, right? Which can, causes a manipulation of the Van Allen belt, and the Van Allen belt pushes out asteroids and meteorites to the planet, which is basically energetic signs of intelligence. So these meteorites that you're basically seeing are the great balls of fire that is going to activate the chosen ones, those who have the ability to receive the knowledge from the magnetosphere, from the cosmos, right? So the 10 days of darkness, this is why I said you got to understand the diametrical difference between the CME and the EMP, because this can either be caused by Iran or it can be caused by the heavens or the mental plane, right? Because it's one of those things where you got a organic reset and you having a synthetic reset happening at the same time. So if the EMP strikes, because one thing you gotta understand, this is how the great majority of these world leaders work together, because you have a United Nations, you have a NATO, right? If I was beefing with somebody, I'm not gonna be, politicking with you on, on any type of level. If I'm saying, if it's really some smoke, it's beef when we see each other. So the same thing should translate when you're talking about, these geopolitical tensions between Iran and China, and Iran and in America, basically. So when you're talking about an EMP, this is where they're gonna put, signals to your phone, even if the grid is shut down. So during the times of the 10 days of darkness of communication, the 10 days, the world will stand still. The internet was shut down. ATM banks offline, phones restricted, emergency calls. But at the same time, you're going to see the emergency broadcast. You're not going to be able to click shit on your phone, but that emergency broadcasting system is going to pop up on your phone still, and you're going to be forced to watch a documentary about the hidden truth that was taken away from humanity. Because, like I said, we living in a time right now where motherfuckers need to sit down and understand what is basically going on. Because everything See, this is another thing. A lot of y'all so-called Christians, y'all quiet right now because a lot of the shit that's basically being extrapolated in the Bible, a lot of that stuff is coming to fruition in real time, but you try to sweep it under the rug because you don't really go to church to get the edification. You go to church for the inspirational ceremony. You go to church, what I'm saying, because that inspirational ceremony in itself makes you feel good. It makes you feel good when a pastor is preaching you some bullshit. So now we living in a time right now where they putting the truth in the news on purpose, and you try to sweep it under the rug. You still going out and partying, and then you go to church on Sunday. So everything that they basically been telling your ass in the Bible is a part of the script in the scripture. They both coexist. So that's why I said, you got to understand the 10 days of darkness, because that's according to Jonah chapter 3, verse 5, where Nineveh shall be overthrown. And Nineveh is modern day Babylon that was connected to the Assyrian Empire. So, so that's basically telling you right now in real time, you know, shit is about to hit the fans. And also, you cannot negate the fact that also during the time period that I think it was during the last shutdown that we basically had, Congress, they got satellite cell phones. They got satellite phones for when the grid goes down. So they've been preparing. Everything is energetically lined up for the Great Reset. So that's why I said this is good that driving will be restricted. Flights is going to be grounded because you ain't got no time to be going on no motherfucking vacation. You need to tune in to yourself and understand what the hell is taking place on the planet, right? Because the planet has to go through a process of spiritual metamorphosis. So this is why the World Economic Forum, or I mean the World Health Organization, said verbatim that the World Health Organization prepare for what is to come. And those of you who've been watching a movie, the TV show on Hulu called Paradise, this is a symbol for a fallout shelter, right? So they telling you in real time to prepare for what is to come. You know what I'm saying? So what's coming? An ecological humanitarian crisis? What's coming? A 10 days of darkness? What's coming? A sleeper cell attack on American soil? So all these things basically line up in real time. You got to understand what the hell is going on, right? So it tells you right here, you got the energy lockdown has been, already activated. So the oil price is starting to go up, which is going to cause a ripple effect in the great majority of the socioeconomic disposition of the great majority of these countries that already are basically lacking resources, like India, right? So you got places like India and Australia that's basically the gas prices is going up and they running out of resources and they running out of oil. I'm gonna show you this video here in a second. Put the rice bowls in the chat. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So let me get this video going for y'all. See, this is going on in India right now. They lined up for the motherfucking gas. Because see, this is what I'm saying. America, due to instant gratification basically plagued this generation. You are not ready for what is to come because, like I said, you're too acclimated to the bread and circus of the westernized world, right? What did Elijah Muhammad said in his book, The Fall of America? It's inevitable. It's going to happen, right? So everybody, according to everything that's taking place from a resource level, everything is going to get attacked from an economic, disposition. And that is going to lead up to, more war or even a civil war on American soil because you're going to have motherfuckers out there fighting for gas.
Guys, it's real. People out here taking.
And then look at this: gas is already $8 in California. Already $8. So just imagine if this keeps going on. Motherfuckers are gonna be out here, pumping gas is gonna be $12, right? That's why I said it's imperative to understand what is going on. Maybe we need another lockdown, an energy crisis lockdown. So a lot of people and these NPCs can sit the fuck down and understand and tune in to what the hell is going on in real time. Maybe we need another shutdown.
It's real. People out here taking pictures. They don't even believe it. $8. $8.21. You might as well get you a horse. Feed us May.
More than 160 petrol stations across Victoria have now run out of fuel. Demand has soared 400%, but the state government insists supply isn't the issue. Panic buying is.
And mind you, this is going on in Australia, right? So it's only a matter of time where it's going to hit the Western world. Because like I said, when you have economic turbulence, that leads to a chronic imbalance to certain societies, right? Specifically Westernized society, because Westernized society is Babylon, and Babylon has to fall according to Jonah chapter 3 verse 5, and we finna get into that as we get through the transmission. Here we go.
At Energy, Clayton South, diesel tanks are dry.
It's not good for the business.
In Glen Waverley, another Bowser out of order. Those just 2 of 97 stations across Victoria without diesel as of 11 o'clock this morning, unleaded at 83 stations had run out.
It completely depends on the supplier.
We need to understand that these numbers can jump around.
With the government insisting the issue isn't supply, panic buying to blame, like here in Doncaster today.
Demand has increased anywhere between 300% and 400%. At the same time, we know that we have more than enough supply.
Triggering long lines for cheap fuel at Ampol St Kilda, $2.37 for unleaded, now considered a bargain.
My husband said this is the place to come down, and I can't actually afford to fill up my whole car.
I expect it's probably going to get a little bit worse as well.
As the price of petrol continues to soar, households are starting to limit car trips to save on fuel. Some now even changing their shopping habits as produce prices are pushed higher.
Probably about 25% to 30% increases so far.
It's really sad that people are
heartless criminals.
So like I said, this also leads to the precursor of a food shortage as well, right? Because it's going to put a stagnation in mass distribution when you're talking about truck drivers and things of that nature. So like I said, that is going to plummet the stock market, right? I'm going to show you what's also interconnected to this from an energy crisis and things of that nature, because it's going to manipulate the stock market, right? So it's also not a coincidence, like I said in my last transmission, that Larry Silverstein, the same man who purchased the 9/11 buildings, purchased the United States Capitol Tower in LA. So all this is coexists with the economic system and in the geopolitical apparatus at the same time. So like I said, it's imperative to understand what the hell is going on, right? So if you ain't been paying attention, when your ass got to go pump some gas and it's $20 or whatever, you're going to be paying attention then, because you ain't going to have no choice but to sit the fuck down. So there goes your vacations, trying to go on road trips and all that, right? The planet has to go through a spiritual metamorphosis. So that means that those who are basically asleep in this great awakening period, you're going to be forced to sit down. You know what I'm saying? As far as like the great majority of the things that you love, as far as like people, places, and possessions. You're gonna have to look down, you have to sit down and face yourself. And a lot of NPCs don't want to do that. Right? Keep playing a video.
Have started siphoning petrol out of cars parked on the street as the crime wave from the fuel crisis gets worse by the day. Now, the price of fruit and veggies across Sydney is skyrocketing as grocers try to cover their ballooning costs.
And mind you, this is not the time to be, interconnected to the ideology of individualism or separatism. This is the time where you have to have, the great majority of the cosmic convergence to amplify unity. So you got to come together during this time period. So, you have to get out of your ego and find you a divine counterpart, right? Get your affairs in order. Get your household in order. So this is a time right now where divine women should be looking for divine men, and divine men should be looking for divine women. You think for her as she feels for you. That is the unification process when you're talking about, activating the spiritual macabre within the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Because remember, Neo, he wasn't able to lead the Matrix until he got with Trinity, because everything is acclimated to a Trinity principle. So this is the time where you gotta find a divine counterpart. There's a reason why in the Bible where they said verbatim that 7 women is going to take on the 1 man, because there's not a lot of real men out here who's able to galvanize resources for their societies and civilizations or their neighborhoods, right? There's a lot of weak dudes out here because they don't understand the ideology of stoicism, because they have a chronic imbalance, too emotional. They're not going to understand, that you have to change the culture with agriculture. So you have to start planting food and all this other stuff again. You have to tap right back into nature, right? So that's why you got to understand, especially during this time period, unification is the key. Oneness is the key, right? It don't matter if, I don't fuck with him, I don't fuck with her. Sometimes you got to set all that stuff aside and understand that the primary objective of the Great Awakening period is unity consciousness. It's not individual consciousness. It's not, I fuck with you, or I don't fuck with him consciousness. It's talking about unity consciousness. Everybody has to come together, right? From a mental frequency, right? From a mental standpoint, meaning that you have to be operating on the same sine wave or the bandwidth that harmonizes with the ecological systems of nature and the celestial bodies that's in our universe.
At the fruit and veg shop, the rising price of petrol leaving supply far from apples.
Rather than coming daily to the market, it's only coming maybe twice a week.
Pushing up prices, the worst produce transported from interstate, like broccoli and fennel.
Probably about 25% to 30% increases so far.
Impacting small business, food producer Elizabeth Hewson sources her ingredients interstate.
How long can I ride this out? And you don't really want to make a drastic change like increase the price straight away.
Today, 51 petrol stations across the state have run dry, 164 without diesel, but fuel still being bought in bulk. This at a Western Sydney servo.
If demand management procedures are required, that might be rationing. We're firmly of the belief that it should be a nationally consistent approach.
Petrol thieves in Victoria targeting
This
parked
is why, like I
cars.
said, a lot of people are going to be stealing gas. That is going to be, so a resource shortage is the precursor to a civil war. Motherfuckers going to be fighting. So that's going to be the embodiment of the have and the have-nots.
Pricing open fuel caps, siphoning tanks. Shoppers adjusting their habits. Retailers.
So with that being said, you already know what time it is. This is the blueprint for the great, separation, for the Great Awakening period, right? But, over the course of time, a lot of these NPCs, they're basically going to go have resistance against the Great Awakening. So you're going to have to separate from them mentally, physically, and spiritually, right? So get the likes up in the chat, get the likes up and share this video, because this is one of the videos where, a lot of people got to tap the fuck in and understand what the hell is going on and on all levels. So I'm going to get my screen share going. We're going to get back to the transmission. Put the rice bowls in the chat. All right. So we at the precursor of an energy lockdown, right? From a worldwide standpoint. And then you also got this going on. How many times I got to tell people, find your purpose or they're going to find one for you. They made your ass get, go to college, get all these jobs. You're $100,000 in debt from, getting, student loans and things of that nature. And you the district manager of Red Robin, Denny's, and now all these shits is about to close down, right? Because they want to replace you with artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence coexists with the tyrannical aspects of the agenda for 2030 when you're talking about the sustainable development goals, right? That basically coexists with their agenda, which is a synthetic golden age, where they have biometric technology controlling the great majority of humans, to where they want to interface humans with technology, which is transhumanism, right? So they're gonna be, like I said, find your purpose, or they're gonna find one for you. So if you ain't got no purpose and you don't have any type of, resourceful intelligence, you don't know anything outside of your job, this is where the NPCs, they fall victim to the fall of the matrix system, the fall of the Metatronic overlay, right? To where they're gonna start putting people in concentration camps. There's another reason why FEMA, they've been giving out warnings, and the Department of Homeland Security been giving out warnings, right? All this stuff coexists together. So find your purpose, and your purpose is not having a good job. A lot of people really think they got a purpose just because they got a good ass job. Just because you making $20, $30, $40 an hour doesn't mean that you're tapped into your purpose. Because your purpose is something beyond people, places, and possessions. It's beyond the illusion. It's beyond the material plane. So you working at Denny's and you being the best, server, that is not your motherfucking purpose. Your purpose, you supposed to be building shit. You supposed to be healing shit, right? So that's why I got to tell people all the time, anything that's acclimated to the matrix, that's not your purpose. But when everything shuts down, the only thing that you got left on this planet is the truth and healing. So the truth tellers and the healers are going to be at the apex of civilization once you have the end of the bifurcation period of the Canaanite culture and their antics, right? That's what you got to understand. Your purpose is not you a truck driver, or I work a 9 to 5 and I work at the bank. I'm the top executive at the bank. That's not no real purpose, right? Your purpose is way beyond anything that's connected to the energy extraction matrix. Then it says right here, breaking in the Global Eye News, $1 trillion has been wiped out from the United States stock market today, right? That's why I keep telling you, the money hasn't been backed by a natural resource since 1934. It's basically fiat currency. So that's why they transmuted humans into humanoid real estate with the social security numbers that has a QSIP number, which is the Community Uniform Security Identification Procedure, that interconnects you to the caste system of democracy that is controlled by the Canaanites, who is the Ashkenazi Jew, right? So the fall of the financial system is the collapse of Babylon in totality. That's what you must understand. So with that being said, the hell with your motherfucking job, you know what I'm saying? Because if the stock market crash, there goes your big organizations, there goes your big companies, Fortune 500 companies, right? All this shit has to shut down. So what good is your purpose if you don't understand anything outside of your confines of reality? Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. And get the lights up. We got 2K people in the building. We living in a time right now. These are prophetic events taking place in real time, and we must get the information out in real time. So it tells you right here, before the lights go out, this is according to the Heritage Foundation on their website, Homeland Security Report. Before the lights go out, the survey of the EMP, which is a electromagnetic pulse deficiency preparedness, reveals significant shortfalls, right? They're telling you. Then it tells you right here, and then they're telling you, specifying the warnings of an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, geomagnetic disturbance, which manipulates the stratosphere to where it causes nuclear detonation of, ionized particles in our atmosphere, which can basically drop the temperature levels at 20 degrees. That's when you get into the science of the ecological aspects of it. But also at the top right here is showing you the countdown to America's 250th anniversary. So it's almost like this is basically a time clock telling you that the EMP is about to go off, right? I thought that was weird when I went on the Department of Homeland Security's website. I thought it was weird that they had the countdown on top when you go to the page talking about the EMPs. Very weird. It's almost like they try to, telegraph something, for what is to come. Right? Now, for those who don't understand, the implications of not a coronal mass ejections, for those who don't understand the implications of an EMP has the ability to cause nuclear detonation, which where radiation strips electrons from the atmosphere. Then it propels them from a rapid level, which manipulates the Earth's magnetic field, right? So that's when you're talking about ground level EMP effects and high altitude electromagnetic pulse. That's what that's basically talking about. So EMP is basically a synthetic version of a coronal mass ejection. Now, this is why you got to watch the movie Paradise. The perception of art imitates reality. Everybody in the chat already know what I'm about to say. The CIA has an office in Hollywood, and Hollywood has an office in the CIA. There's a reason why the script of the movies is in alignment with scripture, because everything, according to the geopolitical situation that's taking place with Iran, is a script that's being played. This is a Freemasonic script that's basically playing out. So you got to watch this movie right here on Hulu called The Paradise, right? It's telling you how the resetting of humanity started with an EMP attack, an EMP. And they talking about, dust particles in the atmosphere and how it basically manipulated the weather, and you had ecological crises and things of that nature. So you got to watch this movie right here because it basically coexists with everything that's taking place in real time according to our situation in America and just from a worldwide standpoint. Now, in the movie, because everything that they do in the movie, they put clues inside the movie, right? In the movie, they talk about how, they was using, mail trucks. Mail trucks is one of the only vehicles that can basically be sustainable during the time of a electromagnetic post deficiency. So if your ass work at a post office, and plus post offices, they're basically they're EMP proof, right? So you can use it's a fallout shelter. So most post offices, they're fallout shelters. And the mail trucks are also EMP proof as well. And then also in the movie, they like I've been telling y'all way before this episode. I told y'all this last year. Get you a vehicle made during the time of the 1970s. Anytime before the year of 1975, some in the 1980s will work or whatever, some of them, but the great majority that will work during the time of an EMP crisis or when you have a shortage of anything. The best thing to do is get you a vehicle made before 1975. This is why in the movie they was going to Elvis's house because he had all the cars. He had all the damn cars that was created in the 1960s and the 1970s, right? So that's why this vehicle would be really efficient, and also a tractor. Another thing, if the grid goes down, you can use a tractor because tractors are EMP proof, right? So if you got a farm or whatever, you're already in the game. Now, this is from the Department of Homeland Security, the Worldwide Caution Security Alert on March 22nd, which is the 322 Skull and Bones Initiative. The Department of States advises Americans worldwide to exercise increased caution. So they've basically been holding simulations about, a terrorist attack that can basically be amplified by Iran or anybody in the Middle East. So they've been holding simulations the whole time. Kind of like the same thing when they did with Cyber Polygon and the simulated events when you're talking about the scamdemic. So the event is the Department of State advises Americans worldwide, especially in the Middle East, to exercise increased caution. Americans abroad should follow the guidance and security alerts issued by the nearest United States embassy or consulate. So all this shit has basically been, it was already, pre-encoded in their system, right? And then, also on top of this, Iran's top military spokesman warned Friday that parks, recreational areas, and tourist destinations worldwide won't be safe for the enemies. This is not the time to be having fun, right? This is the time, like I said, is to lock in and understand intuitively what the hell is going on. You have to use your spiritual and mental fortitude to see beyond the bullshit, right? Otherwise, you're going to get caught up. You think you're going to Disneyland, you're going to Six Flags, and then all of a sudden you're on your favorite roller coaster and that motherfucker, it get blown up. All because you didn't pay attention to what the hell is going on because you too entrapped by your ego. Your ego is the demiurge, and the demiurge is hell. So that means that your mental capabilities or your ideologies was basically going to keep you stuck here, right? So the United States issues a worldwide security alert for the American travelers. Group supportive of Iran may target locations associated with the United States, right? And then you got this going on. Now, I heard from an insider, a guy from Boston. He's been telling me about these ICE agents. He said when he went to the airport, the great majority of these ICE agents don't even look American. So just based on my, my own independent research and my own, logical assertions, I believe that the great majority of these ICE agents are basically sleeper cells that come from the Middle East when you're talking about Iran and other foreign militarized groups that coexist with Iran. So an inside job is going to happen, because one thing you got to understand about this whole thing that takes place when it comes to this matrix system, everything is operated by way of patterns, and I'm gonna get to that here in a second. But the great majority of these ICE agents, they said most of them are they're working with TSA, and a lot of them got their face covered, right? So the sleeper cells is going to be activated. I said in the last video, the final sign. I said in the last live that I did 4 days ago, I said verbatim that Donald Trump, he said on national television that they know where the sleeper cells are at. Then go get them. If you know where the fuck they at, go get them. That's how you know that this is going to be an inside job, because that don't even make sense to me. And for those who don't understand that, I can't explain nothing more advanced than the weather to you. So ICE agents are now patrolling as the United States airports. Here's what to know, so they working with TSA. And then according to the reports, the Senate looks for ways to end the 38-day shutdown, right? You got this going on. And then, like I've been telling y'all, stay off the damn airplanes, right? Because like I said, on Donald Trump's watch, there's going to be a 9/11 event that's going to be taking place on American soil. So you had a plane at LaGuardia Airport in New York City crash into a truck on the runway, right? Crashed into a truck. And then you got this right here. What people got to understand is that especially, a lot of people who are politically naive, a lot of people who just naive to everything as far as like geopolitics. If you don't understand war, you don't understand business, because war and business, they go hand in hand. So there's a reason why Iran says verbatim, we will not lose this war. Trust me, because they own the Strait of Hormuz, and plus they've been preparing for this war for the last 25 years, because they've been building underground tunnel systems for their drone technology. And then Iran produces 400 kamikaze drones per day. We've used 3,000 in 26 days, and that's only 7 to 8 days of our capacity. What you've been hit with so far is just an appetizer. The main course is to come. So prepare. And like I said, because at the beginning of the transmission, they rejecting. Iran rejects the terms to end the war with, proposed by the Trump administration. They want to keep this shit going on. And mind you, what they say verbatim in the news, that this is a divine judgment or divine war for God, who was Moloch, who was Yahweh, who was Enlil. Because according to the Tetragrammaton, YHWH means agreeable and disagreeable, right? Meaning that you're basically double-minded. So that coexists with, the energy extraction matrix, because everything in this matrix system operates in dualism. And dualism is the illusion, and the illusion in itself has an emotional connection. So that's another way to get people sucked in, Democrat, Republican, things of that nature. And then Russia and China shares a insane Iranian propaganda video where the missile blows up the Statue of Liberty, right? But it's not really the Statue of Liberty. It shows you the statue of Moloch, right? Because as I was telling you, Moloch, Enlil, Yahweh, the same motherfucker, just different mythologies and different, metaphysical and esoteric information. It's just different schools of thoughts. That's all it is. Dagon, Remfram, Yaldabaoth, the same person. Now, this is why I was talking about everything in the Matrix operates on a historical pattern. Everything in the matrix operates on a historical pattern because these patterns are interstellar vortex portals to other dimensions of realities. Now, the reason why Jay-Z has been popping up in the news right now is because there's going to be another PSYOP that's going to be taking place on American soil. And the reason I say that is because during the time of 9/11, when Jay-Z dropped Blueprint on 9/11, he still went platinum. I remember when he dropped that, because I remember when my big brother, may he rest in peace, he died, my older brother did. He had this, what I'm saying? He was so, amped up to get the Jay-Z CD. I remember the Blueprint. And the Blueprint, what I'm saying, was an album. If you look at the cover of it, that's when he got initiated into the Blue Bloods, right? Because he went platinum during the time of a blood sacrifice, right? So what this is basically telling me in real time is that there's going to be another 9/11 event that's going to be taking place on American soil, because I think he's going to the Yankee Stadium and having some type of event, and he's also he's coming out with another album, right? So it's kind of like the same thing, is because everything when you're talking about as far as like warlocks and witches and what they do with incantations or whatever, everything operates on periods of portals, right? So the time from when he put out the Blueprint, and this is basically closing the portal for the Great Reset. So could they use him as a psychological operation distraction to basically keep people away, specifically black people, to understand what the hell is going on? So the last time, you had a 9/11 talks and things of that nature, talking about, the Middle East coming over to America and having a terrorist attack, was when Jay-Z dropped Blueprint on 9/11. And then, like I said before, this is also interconnected to Larry Silverstein, the man who bought the 9/11, building, the Twin Towers. He's the man that bought them, and he's also a hybrid Albion European, an Ashkenazi Jew. So that's letting me know that there's going to be a psychological operation on the way, considering the fact that Jay-Z is in the news again, and he's about to drop another album. So this is going to be the closer. This new album is going to probably be his closer album to close the portal that he opened up with the Blueprint album on 9/11. Now you got this going on. So now they desperate. This is how you know that there's going to be a psychological operation that's going to be taking place. They're getting desperate. The United States Army just raised its enlistment age to 42 and removed the legal conviction for weed or drugs paraphernalia as a barrier. So if they're going to go that far with it, you know what I'm saying, that's letting you know right now in real time something is about to happen. And then you got the number 42 right here. 42 is also a sacrificial number that is also acclimated to the gematria code of the word Negro. And I think it was Jackie Robinson. He wore the number 42 as well. So look into that. I forgot because I try to hit all pillars when I do these transmissions. I try to hit the gematria. I try to touch into the politics. I try to get into the metaphysics, and then I try to get into the biochemistry. I try to put everything all in one pot and make it understand for everybody. So I forgot to add my gematria aspect of it, but 42 is a significant number according to this binary matrix system. So the summary of change, and it talks about this, the regular Army and the reserve components enlistment program increases the maximum age at 42. Yeah. So they desperate. So this is a real documentation. And now, before we get into that, this is where we get into the celestial phenomenon and the metaphysics of it. So first, I'm going to show you a video. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. We cooking them up. Illuminati, we on to you. You can't fool us. Like I said, they're going to use Jay-Z as a catalyst. They using Jay-Z as a catalyst, right? Put the rice bowls in the chat. And we also going to get into some Q&A at the end of the transmission. So let me see. Where's the video at? Okay, I think
President's son-in-law to negotiate peace in the Middle East, while also asking Middle East players critical to achieving said peace for $5 billion.
This war was basically concocted by Bibi Netanyahu,
So I keep telling you, you know what I'm saying? Israel is the main country that controls America, right? So that's why you got to understand that, you know, Donald Trump is a chess piece. He is a chaos agent. He's a Scottish Rite Freemason. So he's playing both sides. He's light and he's dark. And he's a Gemini on top of that, right? So he's playing both sides. He's, you know what I'm saying? He got two faces.
Jared Kushner, married to Ivanka, Trump's daughter, Ivanka. By the way, she is the brains in the relationship, not Jared. Jared is making money out of this because this involves his dealings with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia already paid $2 billion to Jared when he left the first Trump White House so he could set up his affinity partners. And now he's making more money, $5 billion from the Saudis once again, in projects in case Iran there is a regime change.
So that's how you know this is how you know that this psychological operation is going to be an inside job. You know what I'm saying? Why are you doing business with the Middle East if we're at conflict with the Middle East? Right? That lets you know right now in real time that the great majority of these deep state actors is going to create the next 9/11 event on American soil.
In Iran. So they essentially, these are the people who convinced Trump to launch a war with no preparation, with no planning, and against the advice of his own military and most people at the Pentagon with the brain. So it's no wonder. It could never last 48 hours. And on Monday, he will do mission accomplished and the stock markets will go to the roof. No way. What happened is that they never...
And I just showed you that they lost $1 trillion in the stock market today, right? I just showed you that document, right? I just showed you that document. So like I said, this is going to cause a ripple effect in the economic socio-disposition of everything that takes place in the Western world.
Calculated that Iran was ready for this war for at least 20 years.
Take Jared Kushner, the businessman whose light unofficial portfolio includes easy assignments such as ending the horror in Gaza, the Ukraine war, and waging the Iran war, and now raising billions of dollars for his investment firm from the same governments he's currently negotiating with on behalf of our government.
It's a diplomatic push here. All eyes now are on Jared Kushner and perhaps Steve Witkoff, where they're going to be next. My sources tell me that these talks could perhaps play out in Islamabad, Pakistan. Brent may have some insights on that as well. But I think what the president's trying to do here is to see if there are, based on certainly the United States conditions and Israel as well, if there could be a path here. And that's why he gave a pause to striking the Islamic republics, their energy capabilities in terms of their production, their energy. But we'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath. However, you can't trust the Iranians. They'll cheat. They'll also try to delay. And frankly, I'm not sure who the administration is working with that's left in the organization chart with regard to the regime. But we'll see this play out.
And in the Gulf, Kuwait says falling missile debris caused by interceptions has left 7 power transmission lines out of service. The attacks come along with signs of a diplomatic channel opening. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has held calls with several countries in the last 24 hours, including Egypt, Pakistan, and Oman. What does it suggest to you about the trajectory of this conflict and the realistic end game scenarios here?
Maybe at this stage we have to look at how the conflict is looking like. It is a regional conflict with controlled escalation across 4 theaters or even more. So it's not anymore a US-Israeli Iranian conflict. You have Iraq involved, you have Syria involved, you have Lebanon involved, Jordan as well. And
remember, they found the tomb of Gilgamesh over in the Middle East in Iran. And like I said in the last transmission, they got the 10th Stargate that's on the 10th energy ley line over in Iran, right? That's what, from an esoteric metaphysical standpoint, that's what this is all about. But from a surface level standpoint, when you're talking about the geopolitical tensions, this is what this basically is extrapolating. But in, the metaphysics of it, which is, spirituality meets science, that's the real information. Right? That's what you got to understand. So that's why you got to understand geomancy and ley line alignments and things of that nature. But I'm gonna get back to the video.
The Gulf, which was a rear base in this war, now it became a front theater. I think the U.S. is saying that we did not give them enough space to negotiate a way out of this.
We don't know where those negotiations stand right now. We understand that there are some conversations happening between different intermediaries. But if negotiations do materialize, you say that the U.S. has the upper hand militarily now. If negotiations do materialize, Iran would have the upper hand, wouldn't it?
Why would it have the upper hand?
Strategically, at least.
Strategically, the U.S., if it keeps holding the Strait of Hormuz, yes, it would. But I don't see the U.S. giving that up, and also I don't see the region, because now it is a region-wide conflict. It's not only confined to the U.S.
So are you saying that if Iran and the U.S. were to agree to stop the war, that wouldn't necessarily mean an end to the conflict because it's a regional one?
Well, indeed, yeah. I mean, Israel is obviously having a different rhetoric to the U.S. one. And the Israeli, I think, Prime Minister said yesterday that I had a chat, he had a phone conversation with President Trump.
Right. He says they're aligned on their objectives, but is that not the case?
Well, politically, I don't see them on the same page, but they're fighting the same war in the same airspace. But they're going in that direction. They have set objectives, which are, I think, two main set objectives, at least that are identifiable. The first is to make sure that Iran never gets or owns a nuclear bomb. And so the second thing that Iran does not or will not.
I think it was like 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump lied, remember? Because when you go to the Trump administration's, to their website on the White House, Donald Trump said, oh, we stripped Iran of their nuclear weapons, right? But they've been telling you, as I showed you in the transmission, they have them still. They have technology they can basically wipe out and destroy the great majority of America, right? Which is also in alignment with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's book, The Fall of America, right? How you think it's going to happen? You have to shut us down from, the energetic grid system with an EMP. So like I said, it could be an EMP or it can be a CME. You got two different resets going on. You got something, that's happening from a cosmic level and a human consciousness level, but you also got something taking place from a geopolitical level when you're talking about these wars.
Pose any kind of a threat to the U.S. or its allies' interest in the region. But other than this, I think both countries have their own agendas, and the U.S. has its own, if you like, domestic politics, Israel as well, and the region. I think it's now not confined to Israel and the U.S. Regional powers now, they should have a say in this because their interests are being affected.
So the Saudis paid $2 billion to Trump's son-in-law, Jared. And now Jared is the U.S. government's point person in the Middle East.
See, this is my question. Who the fuck is you to get $2 billion? You know what I'm saying? The Saudi investment. Who is you? I need to look into you, bruh. Because you somebody important. And he also has that prototype to be your so-called Antichrist. He looks like those Antichrist figures that they put inside the movies. They always make him look very young and, try to clean cut and sharp looking, looking very Eurocentric, basically. So I'm gonna keep an eye on you, buddy. Because, what I'm saying, that's a lot of money. Because, if you was really important, if Donald Trump was that important, why ain't he, breaking this type of business? So what makes you important? So I got my eye on you. Illuminati, we on to you. We on to you.
The New York Times now reports that while Jared is serving as the U.S. government's point person in the Middle East, Jared is simultaneously asking the Saudis for yet more billions of dollars for his private business. More than $2 billion they've already given him. Now he wants more. You know what? Why would they say no?
Talk to us about what you've unearthed in investigating Jared Kushner and his very complex role in the Middle East, both publicly and privately, on behalf of the U.S. government and his own vested business interest.
Sure. So I was very surprised by this because, Jared Kushner had an official role in the first Trump administration, but afterwards he said he wasn't going back to government. He was going to run this private equity firm, Affinity Partners, and that it was going to be just totally above board. So I was surprised to hear from people in the last few months that he's been out there raising more money for his private equity firm at the same time as he has this sort of pseudo government job as the so-called peace envoy for the Trump administration.
So if he were an official government employee, would he be restricted from doing this kind of business abroad? Would there be different disclosure requirements? Like, to what extent does his unofficial status enable him to do things, to engage in business that might not otherwise be allowed?
So this is sort of the $5 billion question right now, right? It's, if you say he has an unofficial job and he's a volunteer, it's true, he is unpaid, he doesn't necessarily have to disclose the things that even, say, Secretary Lutnick has to do. The problem is he has a job that President Trump calls envoy, and he is literally negotiating for the American people. Even, Jared Kushner would say that.
Brett, you mentioned the calculus going on in Iran. Listen to this. The Wall Street Journal is out with a report this morning that Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Iran's neighbors, are getting closer to actually joining the fight against Iran. In about 30 seconds, how would that impact this conflict going forward?
Well, I think our neighbors are tired of it. If anything that these strikes have done has brought our allies closer and closer. Groups that normally would remain neutral are tired of taking Shahed strikes every single night and seeing their tourist centers bombed. Iran's terror empire, in my opinion, is on borrowed time. The mullahs, they've been misfiring. They've tried to sow chaos in the region. Their spokesmen are being silenced forever, and America and its allies are about to end this once and for all.
And now the question becomes, not only who are you negotiating with, but how many different groups are you negotiating with? You've got the secular, you've got the religious factions. Really, the common person like you and I doesn't really know who's in charge.
So with that being said, we're going to get back to the transmission. So that's for that video. Put the rice bowls in the chat and get those likes up, ladies and gentlemen. We are at the apex of the Great Awakening period. You was incarnated, during this time period for a reason. So don't be scared now. Don't be scared that them gas prices is going up. We asked for this shit. We asked to come back during this timeline. So now we get into the cosmological aspects of the transmission. It says that 3 meteorites crashed into the Earth this month, including one in Texas bedroom. Hunter explains why. Now, one thing you got to understand about meteorites contain telluric electromagnetic radiation that basically interfaces with ether, so it's highly intelligent, right? Due to the fact that it basically contains 70, over 70 different amino acids. So this is basically an influx of intelligence. Some people say that this is debris that's coming from the galactic war that's outside the firmament, right? Because outside the firmament, you got different, geographical land masses. And, a lot of these land masses, when you're talking about the custodians, which are the personification of the draconian entities and the archonic forces, they go into war with some of our ancestors that's basically trying to break open the firmament. There's a reason why, in the open vortex transmission, I speak about the opening of certain interstellar vortex portals in between the times of 1943 to 53, 63, all the way up during the time of 2043, because that is the completion code. That's when the firmament basically breaks up, because that is exactly 13 years from 2030. 2030 to 2043 is basically the duration period of when you're going to have a manipulation of the firmament, right? Because when that firmament breaks open, you'll basically be able to see energy, see people for who they truly are, see draconians and things of that nature. Because remember, this firmament, this holographic matrix that we live in, harmonizes and interfaces with the satellite systems of the moon, right? Because the satellite is what subjugates, the two, physical eyes, to the point where it also puts a strain on the pineal gland and encryption to where you're not able to see. But I'm going too far into the transmission. We're going to get into that later. But these meteorites, like I said, they contain intelligence. It contains telluric electromagnetic radiation that interfaces with ether. So it's highly intelligent. That's why you got to watch the movie Meteor Man. And you got to read this book right here by Dr. Malachi Z. York, The Great Balls of Fire Cast at Earth. So he was right. Everybody in the chat put Dr. York was right with a rice bowl. Put Dr. York was right. So there's a reason why he's doing 75 years, in a maximum prison, right? 175 years. There's a reason why. Because he was tapped into the metaphysical information and he was giving it out in real time. And, he was creating his own currency on American soil to where you basically have your own autonomous civilization that's basically separate from the Western world. And they didn't like that. So read this book by Dr. Malachi Z. York called The Great Balls of Fire Cast at the Earth, right? So the meteorites is, enzymes and celestial, debris of intelligence, right? And then you had the largest known asteroid hit Ohio, right? So everything is being extracted from the Van Allen belt, and it hit, close to Serpent Mound. Now, like I said, the intrinsic fire energy, when you're talking about the Great Purification Period and all these energies that's coming to the planet, which is, according to biblical context, is conflagration. These energies coming in is activating the Kundalini energy on the planet, right? There's a reason why they call it Serpent Mound, right? Because the etheric connection to those mound systems is what activates the ecological systems of nature when you're talking about the four horsemen, which is the earth, air, water, and fire elements. The harmonizes with the ether, and the ether interfaces with asteroids and meteorites. So this is basically an influx of intelligence that's basically hitting the planet to upgrade the planet. And just like in the movie Meteor Man, who knows, if you touch the motherfucking meteor, you might get some type of DNA activation. Who knows? But according to this movie, this is basically in alignment with the esoterics of the magnum opus, where a human becomes God in the golden age. How does that happen? You have to interface with the green Ethereum energy, because the green Ethereum energy is where the body operates on 0-point energy fields, right? That is connected to your sign, which is your bandwidth. And your bandwidth contains a certain electromagnetic, vibration, to where you go from the bottomless pit, which is hell, to where you go to earth, which is Eden, that is connected to the heart chakra, 0-point energy fields, that contains an anchor effect that leads up to the heavens. And the heavens in itself is connected to the 12 cranial nerves that harmonizes with the pineal gland, the 12 disciples, and Jesus Christ, right? So that's basically, when you get into the physiology and the neural network, that it also coexists with biblical scripture, right? Because like I said, the olfactory nerve, all these nerve systems is how you activate the Christ within you. Because Christ comes from the word Krishna. And Krishna is the outer manifestation of Shiva, and Shiva means 7. And 7 is acclimated to your scroll of all, your chakra system, that creates the celestial sphere. And the celestial sphere is the 7 islands of Atlantis that represents the 7 chakras, like I said. At the gate of the city of Atlantis, the pillars of Hercules, and Hercules separates from the 2 pillars, which is the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, which is connected to the corpus callosum. So the corpus callosum in itself is a representation of the activation of the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain. That's why I said human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter, because it creates an anchor effect. Because the atlas, what they was talking about, 3-eye atlas, it holds up the world. And it holds up the world with your vibration. It holds up the chalice, which is the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is the connection of the neck and the head, right? Which is connected to your cup of Hermes. So which is your spiritual fluids that sits at the bottomless pit. So that's why I said we're a microcosm of the macrocosm. The macrocosm, the celestial sphere, is the circle of the heavens, the 12 zodiac houses, and the microcosm is the 12 zodiac houses that corresponds with the 12 cranial nerves in the brain, right? So all the stuff that's taking place in real time is happening because of us. Human consciousness manipulates physical matter. So the more you wake up, the more these motherfucking asteroids and these meteorites is going to come to the planet. The more that you wake up, the more you're going to cause a manipulation in the matrix, which is basically an interface transition, a glitch, right? The matrix is going to glitch out because you having a multitude of intelligence that's coming to the planet to harmonize with the chosen ones for a spiritual and metaphysical upgrades. That's what's taking place on the planet. So that's why I said you got to watch the movie Meteor Man, because when he touched that motherfucking meteor, he got more intelligent. He became more of his authentic energy. He was in his higher self. He was the Shakti body. The Shakti body is the spirit of Melchizedek. Melchizedek is Michael. Mikael, which made him an Elohim, right? Because that's where you have these coronal mass ejections. They operate from a 90-degree angle, and they interface with those who's connected to the carbonated factions of the neuromelanin once it's able to be activated. That's what you got to understand. So then when you go to Dr. York's publication in the Holy Tablets, when you see the signs of the times, these meteorites, these asteroids that's extracted from the Van Allen belt, he said verbatim, this will be the preceded by the 7 great thunders. So these are basically the signs of the times, right? These are the signs of the times. All throughout the state of this planet, after the old heavens and the old earth is taken away, a new sky and a new earth is born. How are you going to do that? Right? It has to be an influx of intelligence that has to reverse the polarity of everything that was created by the inversions of Canaanite culture. Right? So that's basically talking about the Christ energy. So they're to be taught by Sadanda or Tammuz, which is the personification of Jesus, which is the Christ. So like I said, there's a metaphysical alignment that's going to be taking place on April 5th on Easter Sunday, right? That is the Christ energy that's coming to the planet that interfaces with all these celestial phenomenons, the great balls of fire. Now, this is where we get into this. So you got the FBI joins search for the former Air Force general with ties to UFO-linked military base who suddenly vanished without a trace. So put the rice bowls in the chat. I'm going to show you another video. Put those rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, we're gonna cook them up. Like I said, we living in a time right now. If you still asleep, that's your fault. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to wake up.
In the U.S. at this time, to say the least, whether it's
Absolutely.
Arizona with Nancy Guthrie or in New Mexico.
The fact that he was a high-ranking military official with high security clearance at a variety of positions in the military, of course, at that base in Ohio that has been long rumored to have ties to UFOs, extraterrestrials.
See, one thing you got to understand about extraterrestrials. A meteorite or asteroid is technically an extraterrestrial because it's something beyond this terrain. It's something extra. It's extra beyond this terrain that hits the 3-dimensional plane, right? So technically it could be an extraterrestrial, but like I said, a lot of these asteroids and these meteorites contain over 70 different amino acids. So that's basically telling you that there's some type of extraterrestrial humanoid DNA that's on these meteorites.
Long rumored to have ties to UFOs, extraterrestrials, things of that nature.
Retired Air Force General, Air Force Major General Neil McCaskill vanished after being seen leaving his home in New Mexico on foot 3 weeks ago. Okay, investigators are now looking into the disappearance of his former colleague, Monica Reza. Is there a connection?
Yeah, this connection is so compelling that you can't ignore it, right? The investigators can't ignore it.
With the FBI now joining the search for a retired Air Force general who was once in charge of a base associated with UFO conspiracy theories. William McCaskill was last seen on February 27th in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That according to the local sheriff's department. McCaskill held some of the most sensitive positions in the U.S. military, including commanding the research lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which conspiracy theorists have long believed holds extraterrestrial debris tied to the so-called Roswell incident, where some think a UFO...
Now, mind you, from 1947, that's where they got night vision technology from. They got night vision technology from the crash at Roswell in 1947, for those of you who don't understand that. So a lot of that time, during that process, a lot of the technology that we have in our military comes from this crash.
crashed in 1947. The Air Force has always denied those links. But McCaslin's extraterrestrial ties have caused speculation about his disappearance. His wife addressing that in a Facebook post, writing that he had access to highly classified information.
Several neighbors told us off camera they'd regularly see McCaslin walking in the area.
It's unusual, and it's not, it's unsettling that something would happen to someone. We walked right by there Friday morning, would have been around 11 o'clock, and nothing out of the ordinary in the area, so it's strange.
Investigators said the 68-year-old aerospace engineer had been experiencing what they called mental fog, but they have no information he was disoriented when he left home on foot February 27th. The sheriff is now making a plea for actionable tips.
So get this, 9 months ago, a woman by the name of Monica Reza disappeared while hiking in the Los Angeles forest. By all accounts, she had been hiking with a friend. Things had been completely normal. That friend had turned around, saw Monica, she smiled and waved, and they continued on their hike. And then moments later, he turns around, and Monica was nowhere to be found. So search and rescue crews went out to the forest. They searched for Monica for days, and her body was never found, still has not been found to this day. Now, what makes this so interesting is that Monica Reza actually knew and worked with General McCaslin, who's missing right here in New Mexico. Reza was an aerospace engineer. She had invented this special type of metal that was used in rockets. It was a program that was funded by the United States government, and it was a program that was overseen by General McCaslin while he was still in the United States Air Force. So now, all within less than 1 year, both Monica Reza, the aerospace engineer, and General Neil McCaslin here in New Mexico have essentially vanished off the face of the earth with no trace of either of them. So this was something I brought up to the Bernalillo County Sheriff here in Albuquerque, who's investigating the disappearance of the general. I asked whether or not they knew about this, if they've linked the two cases, and whether or not maybe they're communicating with law enforcement in California about it. And I'm still waiting to hear back on whether or not they've connected the two.
BCSO is leading the investigation into his disappearance after issuing a silver alert on Friday. BCSO, Kirtland Air Force Base, and the FBI are all working together to expand their outreach. So far, investigators have only said they're concerned for McCaslin's safety because of medical reasons.
The parts of this case that pique people's interest, the UFO research, the past research in highly classified programs in the Pentagon. Based on what we know about his past, what his wife said, the evidence in this case, do you believe his disappearance is suspicious, or that his past, his work history, is part of his disappearance?
So investigators have to go on facts, not conspiracies, but they have to keep an open mind. They have to be objective, right? A conspiracy is only a conspiracy until you have some facts to start backing it up, and then it becomes.
And salute to my bro, Dre O'Dre. Make sure y'all go follow his channel. Salute to Dre. Salute to my brother. And we got a lot of things that's going to be taking place here in the spring. Once it gets a little warmer, me and him, we've been sharing a lot of ideas and things of that nature. So salute to my bro.
Fact. So they're keeping their eyes open for a little bit of everything.
The county sheriff's department in New Mexico there recently said that they were looking into see if there's a possible connection between the disappearance of Monica Reza and the general, given the kind of work that they did and the strange disappearance in terms of the timing. Do we know anything about the disappearance of General McCaslin's former colleague at this point?
We do know that Monica Reza disappeared in highly unusual circumstances in the Angeles Mountains in California in June of 2025, over just about a year ago. And the circumstances are very unusual. She was about 30 feet behind one of her colleagues whom she was hiking with. He turned, looked at her. She gave a wave to say she was absolutely fine. He turned a few moments later and she had completely disappeared. And when he went back to check, there was no sign of her. What adds to the intrigue with the disappearance of Ms. Reza is that while the search was still going on, while helicopters were in the air and search and rescue parties were still searching for her, someone unknown posted a death notice announcing that she died on the first day of her disappearance. There never has been any formal obituary, no formal death certificate, because Monica Reza's body has never been found, and there's no evidence at all on who provided that death notice. It's quite sinister and unusual.
But authorities who are leading this case, the Bernalillo Sheriff's Department in New Mexico, said that he was not impaired, he was not disoriented, was not confused, and did not show any signs of.
So that's with that when it comes to that. And salute to everybody in the chat, by the way. We're going to get back to the transmission here. Okay. Also got 2 documents I need to show you guys too. So I can put that in there. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, this, I forgot to implement this also taking place. You got, even though the guy, he's disappeared and things of that nature. So salute to the Chief Rod Hayes. He sent me these. So something's going to be taking place pretty soon. According to the HR 7741 introduced the 119th, which is a metaphysical codex for 9/11 mirror flip Congress 2025 to 2026, February 26, aims to promote the competition of digital energy management tools, right? Because remember, I was telling you guys that the Uniform Commercial Codes, well, the maritime law is gaining jurisdiction through the Uniform Commercial Code, right? A digital prison. So this is where they're going to implement the quantum financial system, which is connected to the Federal Reserve note will be delisted as a legal tender on Wednesday of April 1st of 2026. In line with the fiat United States dollar no longer worth anything by April, the gold and asset-backed currency of 209 nations, including the United States note and the new quantum financial system. So it's talking about that. Salute to the Chief Rod Hayes. So now you got this stuff going on, the militarized group sending warnings to Cuba. And then we're going to get into this. Now, I told you, you got to understand something. I don't know if this story is real or fake, but, if it is real, according to the timeline that we're basically on, this is basically in alignment with Jonah chapter 3, verse 5, where Nineveh shall be overthrown because the sign of Jonah is where he was inside of the belly of a whale. But I did some digging. A whale is also the personification of a suborder Odoctocidae. And a suborder Odoctocidae is basically a toothless, not a toothless, but a toothed dolphin. A dolphin is a toothed whale, basically. So this is the sign of Jonah. So a dolphin is a toothed whale, which is a suborder Odoctocidae, right? So according to the timeline that we're basically on, this is basically in alignment, right? Because the sign of Jonah was also interconnected to the judgment of Babylon. When you're talking about those 3 solar eclipses, I keep telling people the significance of those 3 solar eclipses that took place in 2017, 2023, and 2024. Those 3 alignments in itself is what basically set up the judgment that is actually taking place in this timeline in real time, which is why I said that Nineveh shall be overthrown, modern day Babylon, America, that was connected to the Assyrian Empire. So the sign of Jonah was this man getting kidnapped by some motherfucking whales. If this story is real, I don't know if it's real or not. I've heard people talking about it, but I'm saying they've been making a lot of AI stories. But if this is real, this is basically in alignment with the sign of Jonah, right? And before we get to the end of the transmission, we also you had the OnlyFans guy. He died at the age of 43. So with these new energies that's coming to the planet, it's reversing the polarity of the inversions of Canaanite culture. So that means that the hedonistic practices that was connected to all these alphabetical groups and like Black Lives Matters, all these people who own hedonistic websites and things of that nature, all these energies is starting to fall, right? All these energies is starting to fall because it cannot coexist with the Great Awakening period. Now, before we go, this is what I'm going to start incorporating at the end. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be talking about, a message at the end of the, my end of my transmissions. So I said verbatim my status that setting boundaries is my favorite way to put motherfuckers in their place. You cannot treat me however you want. You cannot talk to me when or however you want. You cannot take advantage of my energy, my accessibility, my loyalty, my vibe. You're not allowed. I will unfriend, unlove, unfamily a motherfucker real quick when it comes to people trying to break my limits by draining me of my authentic energy. Remember, some people only want to be around you because they lost their light. So they want to piggyback off your vibration. Be wary, because people using you for your spiritual currency is far worse than people using you for your money. So that's why I said, when you have a divine vibration, when you have true authentic energy, that's just like you being a BMW in the car next to you, and you know what I'm saying, their battery is dead. So they want to feed off your vibration, right? Because they see that you're basically in alignment. So this is why it's imperative to understand that setting boundaries is a form of psychic self-defense. It's spiritual protection, basically. So that's one thing people got to understand during this process. Set your boundaries, because energy exchange is very real. Set your motherfucking boundaries, especially during this time period. This is the time where you need to tell somebody no, because like I said, gas prices is already gonna be high as hell. So this is the time where you got to start telling people no. Set your boundaries. No, you can't use my damn car. Gas is $20. You can't use nothing of mine, right? So you got to separate from those energies and separate from those people who make you feel bad for having boundaries. Like I said, boundaries is spiritual protection. Spiritual protection is operated by way of psychic self-defense, right? Because your mind is what produces your auric field, and your auric field produces geomagnetic energy fields around the body, which is basically a protectorate. It protects your cipher. So with that being said, put the questions in the chat. We finna get into some questions. Salute to everybody. Salute to Also Melanin. Salute to Linda Champion. Yeah, we're gonna get the questions in here. So protect your energy. Protect your energy during this time period, because there's going to be a lot of low vibrational people who was basically acclimated to the confines of the matrix system. They're going to be mad that they losing their jobs, right? Their whole damn world is going to crumble because, like I said, they have an emotional attachment to the physical world. They have no spiritual connection. They have a spiritual disconnection because they subjected themselves to the people, places, and possessions that basically interfaces with the matrix, right? That's why I keep telling people, your purpose is beyond your motherfucking job. Your purpose is beyond you being a truck driver. Your purpose is beyond you, being a pilot. Your purpose is beyond you being a basketball player, a football player, or a rapper. So one thing you got to understand about black people are the only type of people who base their aspirations that few ever attain, right? Everybody want to be a ball player. You don't want to be a scientist. You don't want to know how to build something, right? So this is why I keep telling people, maybe the world needs to lock down so we can tap back into nature, because a lot of people started to wake up during the last scandemic when everything got locked down. That rose up the vibration of the planet. You know what I'm saying? As much as that the brother Rashad Jamal, he had his name in my mouth a few times. I still got respect for him. But I would be a liar to say that he didn't play a big part of the Great Awakening period when the world was shut down, right? He played a big role in that. He played a major role in that. Young Pharaoh did too. But this is the thing, though. Everything that operates in the matrix system has a historical interstellar vortex pattern. So the same thing is going to happen, again, eventually. So this is where the vibration has to raise up again. Everything operates in tiers and waves. It's a pattern, but you got to catch it. So that's why I said this is the time right now where people need to be tapping into their purpose. Find out what really makes you authentic, because your authenticity is the personification of your aura, and your aura is interconnected to your higher self. So if you don't have any authenticity, you're not maximizing your potentiality to be your higher self, right? Which is why I talk about this stuff in my book. It's important to know who the fuck you are. Authenticity is the most intrinsic resource on the planet, right? You cannot kill authenticity. Authenticity in itself is connected to the energy of thermodynamics. Energy cannot, be destroyed. It can only be transmuted. You can transmute the energy, your energy, into a different person who's trying to wake up. So if you're tapped into your own authentic energy, just imagine what you're going to do for somebody else who's watching you. That's energy transfer. That's basically the same thing as horizontal gene transfer, transformation, conjugation, and transduction, right? And I talk about this stuff in my book. So the fall of Western civilization in totality is actually the resurrection of your authenticity, right? That's why I said I hope everybody who's been tapped in, the chosen ones, who's been, true speakers and healers, we've been waiting for all this shit to fall down, and it's happening in real time. And I can't believe it. You know what I'm saying? I love end of the world movies. I love movies that, post-apocalyptic. I've been waiting for this time. So I hope, what I'm saying, gas, prices get so bad to the point where the damn gas stations got to shut down. I hope it get like that. And put y'all questions. I don't know if it's updating, but put y'all questions in the chat if y'all got some questions. Because it's definitely not updating. So but yeah, we living in the time right now, like, this is the time to get your shit together. Get your affairs in order. Get your household in order. The women got to be in order. Because as I was telling you guys before, if the woman is out of order, the whole household is out of order. If the whole household is out of order, the whole civilization is out of order. If the whole civilization is out of order, it's because the whole universe is out of balance, right? The divine feminine energy has to get back in order to reset, the implications that was created by the Canaanite, right? The resurrection of the divine feminine energy. And the divine feminine energy doesn't mean that it basically subjugates masculine energy. It just means that feminine energy and masculine energy has to coexist and they have to work together. It doesn't mean that the woman is above the man. In fact, you know what I'm saying? The original protectors of Earth was actually the women, right? But that's a whole different transmission, right? I mean, it just makes, when you understand the physiology of a woman, it just makes sense for a woman to protect, because, the woman's womb in itself protects the child. So what you think is going to happen, from a macrocosmic aspect, when you're talking about how everything, in nature and how you build sustainable, civilizations. So put the rice bowls in the chat, and I'm trying to get to these questions a little bit. Okay, we got some questions. Here they come. Salute to Lokes of Hope. Do mixed race biracial people have souls? Both my parents so-called half black, and my hair still defies gravity and grows towards the sun. It's 4C, maternal grandmother 100% black, and paternal grandfather 100% black. One thing you got to understand is that when you get into microbiology and genealogy, you get the recessive from the dominant. You don't get you get the recessive from the dominant. You don't get the dominant from the recessive. So that means that the black gene is the most intrinsic gene because it contains neuromelanin and things of that nature. So just because your hair, your hair defies gravity in itself because it's spiraling towards the sun. And the sun in itself, when you get into the esoterics and the root words or whatever, it means soul, S-O-L, solar system. Your soul is interconnected to the solar system, but the soul in itself can only be activated by the ways in the energies of ether. And ether is basically your antenna that connects you to the cosmos. So your hair follicle basically matters. right? Because it represents the intrinsic force of cosmic radiation and solar radiation. So mixed people, and it's also one of those things where it depends on bloodline, because I also extrapolated once before that every bloodline has a cursed bloodline. You don't just have white Canaanites, you got black Canaanites too, right? Because when Yakub, when he did the genetic splicing program, when he put the rat, cat, and dog, and fruit fly monkey and things of that nature, Rhesus monkey, snub nosed monkey, and he basically interfaced it with human DNA, and this is when he started genetic splicing. The first ones that he genetically spliced were basically black Canaanites, because in order to get the white gene, you got to break down the black gene. You got to understand that. Okay, we're going to get into... But that's another thing. So just because you got melanin don't mean you safe. It depends on what bloodline you come from. Okay. Okay. Says this universe, this is a matriarchal tropical realm. The universe is a womb. Yes. In fact, like I said, I also extrapolated it was all women on the planet way before men. This earth was contained of all women. All women at one point of time, when you understand the metaphysics of parthenogenesis. And I already spoke about that in a different transmission. Okay. How you feel about the NBA resembling a team in Seattle? It could just be another distraction, man. Just to add more, bread and circus to the motherfucking circus. Add more bread to the circus. More distractions. And for those, if I don't get to your questions tonight, go to Instagram and send me some messages. Follow me on Instagram. My nomenclature title for my Instagram at the bottom is BDL1014. And I will answer your questions as the best that I can on Instagram. Okay. Do you think that Trump's son-in-law is his handler? I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, he does fit the prototype of what your standardized perception of what they call an antichrist. So he fits that placement. And plus, like I said, if he's breaking business and he's getting an investment from Saudi Arabia, $2 billion, that lets you know right there, you got to follow the money. Follow the money. Because you ain't just a regular degular ass person if you just getting, a $2 billion investment from the Middle East. Because this is another thing when it comes to Christians. They got a lot of, people anybody who's confined to religion, you really got life fucked up. And the reason I say that is because as I talked about before, your antichrist that you speak about in your Bible is not somebody who works at Sonics. It's not somebody who is working the assembly line at a factory. It's not somebody who is a bus driver. Antichrist is going to have political or economic influence from an international standpoint. So that means that the people who control your religion also control the resources that's connected to the financial infrastructure, everything that's connected to our reality, basically. So if they can control that, what makes you think they're not controlling the religion? So that lets you know right there in real time that you need to divorce yourself from the religion, right? Your antichrist is going to be somebody who has political, economic, or religious influence. So that should be right. That should be the sign right there to be like, okay, let me step away from all this shit. Right? There's a reason why when you go to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, Job chapter 9, Job chapter 9, verse 12, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 24. Right? It's principality at higher places. And what are those high places? Hollywood, CIA, police force, government, Food and Drug Administration. Those are the high places. That's what you got to understand. Yes, wickedness in high places. And the world be given to the hands of the wicked, which is the Canaanite. So it's salute to Benzino. I look at the movies like X-Men. Magneto was never the enemy. He was the catalyst trying to convince Professor X for the humankind to tap into their true power. What a tangible way that we can tap into our gaining our powers. The activation of the X gene, right? Because one thing you gotta understand about Magneto, because Magneto was a personification of electromagnetism, because his electromagnetism started with the frequency of his mind, which is why he put on the helmet. Because Magneto is in alignment with the mental plane, and the mental plane is the magnetosphere, right? That's when you get outside the confines of the firmament and things of that nature. But the magnetosphere is the mental plane, and the mental plane is the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is where you activate your spiritual powers that is interconnected to the epikinetic body. Because that information, your true power is already inside your genetic makeup. It's already pre-encoded inside your genetic makeup. But you got to activate the X gene, right? Because the X symbol in itself is also a feminine symbol. It's a feminine symbol that's interconnected to the unknown. It's an unknown spiritual energy that you're basically trying to remember. And you can only remember it when you tap into the memory bank, right? You got to remember who the fuck you are. It's the same concept when Robin Williams, when he played in the movie Hook, he wasn't able to tap into his true power until he started to remember. When he started to remember, he was able to fly, he was able to fight, he was in shape, he was his higher self. So the same thing takes place when you're talking about, where human becomes God in the golden age. That is basically the embodiment of mental and spiritual metamorphosis on the planet. You got to tap into the Sahu body. You got to tap into your higher self. And how you do that, I talk about it in my book. The link is in the chat. You got to be connected to the 4 basic elements of the soul, which is thinking, reasoning, understanding, and willpower. You got to have the willpower to, do something constructive. You got to have the willpower to do something that's basically self-affirming, which puts you in alignment to your higher self, right? So that's how you activate the X gene. It gives you the propensity to take back your power, right? It gives you the propensity to not believe in things outside of yourself. Anytime you believe in anything outside of yourself, that's what basically makes you an antichrist, right? Because Robin Williams in the movie, he believed in his job, he believed in making money, but when he started to go inward, he got all his powers back. You got to watch the movie. A lot of these children movies or whatever, they show you that real information. A lot of these old movies, because he was so succumbed, subjected to his job or whatever. That's the only thing that he cared about, making money, his job. He didn't give a fuck about his family too much. He was just only, acclimated to the Western world, being a CEO and things of that nature. That's the fake world, because all those energies of distraction is what basically disconnects you from your higher self to where you're able to tap into these abilities, psychometry, clairvoyance, and intuition, right? Same concept with the movie The Last Dragon, right? Bruce Leroy wasn't able to, become the master until the fact that he was able to find out that he was the master. When you pull your energy away from something, that's when you tap into your higher self. Anytime you worshiping and believing in shit outside of yourself, that's when you become the Antichrist. And it strips away your electromagnetism. So that's the only way to remember. And the movie I'm talking about is The Last Dragon. It says, salute to Arlo Burton. What is your take on investing in physical silver and gold, especially upon the dollar crash? You can use silver and gold as a placeholder. You can use it as a placeholder for the next timeline, for the next financial shift. That's what you can use it for. But also, having liquid cash is also one of those things where if you have liquid cash, that's also, if the grid goes down, you can still use it as a form of power. You can still have a barter system with liquid finances. Okay, let me get a couple more questions in. Let's see, a couple more in, then we're gonna vacate the premises. Yeah, Robin Williams, the movie I was talking about was called Hook. It's called Hook. A lot of these children movies, they have a lot, and don't spam the chat, please. Thanks for helping, but please don't spam the chat. Thank you. I appreciate you. Okay. Let me get into a couple more questions. I believe in the book of Amos, they talk about how heaven is in the Orion, and Orion is a star constellation. But Orion's belt, according to Job chapter 38:30, or Job chapter 30, verse 31, it talks about how it's the ending of the Pleiadian light lock, right? Because the intrinsic energy that's coming from the heavens, the Orion star constellation, that's also in alignment with the pyramids of Giza and the great majority of these mounds that's in America, they're basically in alignment with the Orion star constellation. So the Orion, what they call it Ouroboros or Uranus, but Orion is also the personification of heaven. It's the seventh heaven, which is why they came out with the TV show Seventh Heaven, right? Because the seventh heaven is the Orion star constellation. Okay. That's why, what I'm saying, people who's just stuck in the Bible, they don't even understand celestial alignments and star constellations. They just believe shit. Like, that's why I don't rock with people who just believe in anything. I never got along with people who just believe shit. You know, let me see. We got some chats coming in. The sun rays in itself contains an energy of tachyon vibrations. And those tachyon vibrations harmonizes with the magnetic field of your body that is also interfacing with the telluric patterns that's interconnected to the Earth's magnetic field. So it's kind of like the as above, so below aspects of it, right? That's what it's basically amplifying. It is basically the centrifugal and the centripetal forces that's coming together. And that's what activates the sun heat genes, granulations, and prominences. Okay. Getting to one more question. And one pretty soon I'm gonna just come on here and just do Q&A. That way I can answer everybody's questions. You know what I'm saying? Put the rice bowls in the chat and get the lights up, ladies and gentlemen. And over, about 60 to 70% of the people, who watch this channel, they're not subscribed. So hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button and get the information out. I'm gonna get one more question in, now I'm gonna get up out of here. BDL, are you familiar with your galactic signature? Or are you leaning into an aid your presentations? I would just say, I believe that I'm a messenger. I think that's my galactic signature. I'm a messenger, nothing more. Just a man of information who understands, certain things, and I bring them to the forefront. That's what I do. And also, I believe my energy signature is to be the glitch, Because, one thing when you're trying to, give the edification to people who are basically stuck in darkness, you got to look like them, right? Yes, like I told you guys this before, I got spiritual garments and crystals, and I got a fez, and I got head wraps and all that stuff. I don't wear it all the time, right? Because you want to resurrect the people. You want to look like the people that you're trying to resurrect. That way you can have a coexisting vibration. So that's why, I think my galactic signature in itself is to be the glitch, to operate from a place of balancement and to be one of the true speakers on the planet, I'm going to do one more. I'm out of here. Do one more. Let's make sure we get a practical question. Okay. Okay, I'm not getting. It's not updating, but I'm gonna just try to find a decent one. Why do you think Atlantis is being hidden from the population? It's not being hidden because it tells you in the Oriental Freemason, it tells you in the Oriental Freemasonic book that America is actually Atlantis, right? So they put the information out, but like I said, that basically coincides with the phrase, if you want to hide something from a nigga, put it inside of a book. So they've been telling you, the information is out there. You just got to know where to look for it, right? Because some people, they think they doing something just because they reading. Just like you can watch and listen to the wrong shit, you can be reading the wrong shit. So the information is already out there. So not Atlanta, but Atlantis is Atlantis, but America is actually, the apex of is Atlantis, basically. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys for pulling up tonight for me to demonstrate the edification, talking about the ecological humanitarian crisis and the afflictions of it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back with another transmission pretty soon. Be on the lookout and be very vigilant. Like I said, the sleeper cells are out here. They can be activated at any time. You know what I'm saying? And this is also the time to sit the fuck down. Stop trying to go out and party and understand what's taking place from a geopolitical level, from a spiritual level, and from a biblical religious level as well, because they put a lot of the scripts that's basically acclimated to the scripture. So this is the time right now, just basically, pay attention to everything. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.
I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day when I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. this a completion. The selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. You try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History, it's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.